Well, hello and welcome to the channel. My name's Johnny and you're watching Hillbilly Modeling, and this is part 6 of our T3485 by Tamiya. I am 1/35 scale, so we got a lot to do in this video. We're going to wrap the whole thing up with some weathering and all kinds of neat stuff, a little bit of rust here and there, and we got to do our tracks, and that's going to be very interesting. First time I've ever done metal tracks, so I hope you enjoy this part 6, and let's jump on down to the bench and wrap this thing up. So we're going to start off working on our tracks. So first thing we need to do is clear off some workspace, and we do need to lay down some cardboard here. That's going to be our first line of defense here in working with our tracks, and also allow us to move these really flexible tracks around and set them off to the side later on without having to touch them. Then I'm going to put some plastic down, which is kind of important because we're going to be using a burnishing fluid. So we're going to go ahead and put some gloves on here because we don't want to stain our fingers. Next thing is to roll out our tracks. So when you're working with metal tracks, you have basically two options: either some sort of burnishing fluid or just to paint them. In this particular case, we're going to be using a fluid, and this is from AK Interactive, and that is the metal burnishing. It's not all that expensive. I have experimented just a little bit, as you can see with this, and the best way to approach it is to pour it into a disposable cup. That way, as you'll see, as we start to use this fluid, we're not going to be contaminating the bulk of our fluid which is left in the bottle. So what we have here is a toothbrush, just an old toothbrush, and I'm just going to dip it and wet the bristles, and then we're just going to basically dab and brush this on. The fluid acts almost instantaneously, if I can say that. As you can see here, it doesn't take no time at all for it to start to react with the metal, and that bright metal work starts to get burnished and colored really quick. Now once we've got it applied to one side, we'll just flip it over and we'll start working on the road contact surface side. And here's where this brush really comes in really important, because of the cast-in waffle pattern that these tracks have. This fluid has a real hard time of getting down in there. It kind of gets like little air bubble locked, you know. And if that fluid cannot touch the metal, it's not going to change the color of it. So you have to kind of work the fluid in to these little bitty recessed areas in the little waffle pattern in order to get it to react. And now as soon as it starts to change color, you've got enough. You've done enough work in that area, and you can just move on. Now once we're done coating our tracks, it's time to set them aside. This is where that cardboard comes in pretty handy here. That way we can just set it aside as a unit and let it dry. Now we're going to let it dry for a couple of hours, and then we will rinse it in warm tap water, and that will get rid of any residual chemicals that's on the tracks. So in our last video, that was part 5, we applied our decals and sealed those in with the gloss clear coat. But as you can see here, they're kind of bright. So what we need to do is we need to kind of blend them in a little bit with the surrounding area so that they don't look so stark and superimposed, but actually integrated into the vehicle itself. And we're going to do just a little bit of sponge chipping. So I have some water and a Q-tip for mistakes. It's important to keep that around, and a little piece of sponge. And we're going to be using the same Panzer Gray that we used before to during our painting video to do our sponge chipping. And this is the same technique. We take and load the sponge with a little bit of paint. Then we're going to unload the sponge with the greatest majority of the paint. We just want to leave just a little, very, very little trace amount of paint on the sponge, just enough to barely transfer it. And remember, small chips are your friend, so the smaller you make them, the better off you're going to be. And we're just going to apply these chips right over that nice bright white decal there to kind of help blend that into the rest of the surface so that it looks like it's supposed to be there, as you can see right there. Now, if you make a mistake, that's what the Q-tip in the water's for. Just a little bit of water, or just dip your Q-tip, I should say, into the water and just clean it up right away, just as soon as you see that you've made that little error, and then just continue on chipping. So a quick comparison here. You can see the difference between the chip side and then the non-chip side. And this is all about putting those decals into character with the rest of the model. Now the next thing we're going to do is seal everything in with this Model Masters Acryl Flat Clear. That's going to get rid of that really, really shiny surface. There we go. That's nice and dulled down for us there. It's kind of got a satin look to it. And this is going to prepare the model for our next steps. As you can see here, we've gotten rid of all of that horrible gloss coat there. And now it looks more like a tank. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some body to some mud. Now I want to lightly use this Vallejo acrylic water-based mud. And then we got some water on standby for mistakes, along with a Q-tip, of course, which we're going to need for any cleanup, which is important because this acrylic mud is going to dry pretty quick for us. And then, of course, we got a little piece of paper towel there. It may become necessary to clean our brush intermittently here because that stuff does kind of dry rather quickly. And I'm just going to use a small brush here. Now don't use your good paintbrush for this. Use one that is at the end of its life. And we're just going to add some body here around our road wheel arms and on the side of the hull a little bit there, just to add some texture. Not a lot, just I'm just going to go with a light muddy appearance here. And with the motion of the tracks, of course, there's going to be little clumps of mud thrown up underneath the fenders, and we just kind of want just a little bit of that hanging down. So I really just want to capture that little effect there of having mud hanging out from underneath our fenders. Now I'm going for a light effect, so I'm not going to overdo it here. We don't want to have anything interfering with the tracks, of course. You need to keep that into mind. So after that has dried, we're going to do some dot filtering. So I've got some artist oil paints here. That's burnt umber, ochre yellow, and of course we got our titanium white. And you can use any artist paints, it doesn't matter. Well, for me anyway, it doesn't matter. Here I've put these paints on a paper towel, and that's going to kind of drain away any excess linseed oil that we have in those paints. Now we're not going to have to let these paints set, just get the majority of that oil off of them, and then I'm just going to transfer it to a piece of cardboard to make it easier to use. And we'll do that with all three colors. So we're going to need a paper towel and some blending brushes, and also we're going to be using our Testors enamel thinner as our carrying agent here, or blending probably blending agent probably is better describing what we're going to be doing with it. And then of course I'm going to use some toothpicks as well as my applicators. Now we're not going to need a whole lot of these oil paints. As you can see here, I'm just using the toothpick to put in some dots. We're going to start with our really dark brown color here, putting it just underneath brackets and the grab handles and stuff. This is where we're going to be streaking these oil paints, and so wherever, more or less to simulate dark streaks, possibly rust. We're going to put that in right there, and we're going to move on to our yellow ochre. Now this color, you got to be kind of careful how you use it because it is kind of overwhelming. It is a bright color. I'm not using a whole lot, as you can see. We're just putting just some really fine dots down, and this is going to give us a kind of a filter effect. And then we'll move on to the white, which will give us a fade effect as well. And just a couple of dots there, you know, just I just kind of stick them wherever I think I want these different shades to interact. With that done, we're going to go ahead and load up our brush here with a little bit of clean enamel thinner. And as you can see here, we're just going to pull it down. And as the brush loads up with that oil paint, we're going to unload that off of the brush. And then we need some fresh enamel thinner, and we're just going to go over the model a little bit here. And you can see that the colors are starting to interact with one another. And we're just going to keep working it. Now we're not painting the surface, we're actually removing the greatest majority of these oil paints, and we're just going to keep going over it here. Now the important thing to remember is that my brush strokes are in the direction that water would run off of whatever part we're working on. So we're going to do a downward streaking motion here on the side of the turret, and later on we'll be using a blotting method on any horizontal surfaces, and we're just going to keep moving around on this surface area here and removing paint a little bit at a time. And as you can see, we're starting to get the effect that we want. We've got that dull kind of weathered look. The yellow ochre is really playing in nicely, and we're just going to keep working the areas until we get the streaking effect that we want. And if we have too much of a built-up color, we can just easily remove that using the enamel thinner. Now this is where that flat clear coat really comes in handy, because that actually gives us a surface that will grip and hold on to our pigments from the oil paint. Now it's really hard to try to do this over a gloss clear coat, so it's kind of like preparing the canvas so that flat clear coat is what is holding these pigments onto the surface for us. Now if you blend too much of your darker color away, like the burnt umber there, and I kind of want some streaks here, you can just go back and add a little bit, and we'll just blend that down. And now I've switched over with my brush and kind of using it edge on to pull those darker pigments straight down. And that's kind of what we end up with. I think it's looking pretty good. That's the side that we haven't done, and the side that we have done. And we'll just keep working around the turret, and then we'll use a blotting motion on the flat surfaces on the top. Here on the side of the hull, I've switched over to a little bit thinner brush to help blend those kind of rust streaks that we got going on with the burnt umber. The smaller brush will help us get in around some of these details here and remove any excess amount of oil paint that we've got on there that we don't want to stay. So kind of divide up your work areas. I am doing the slanted and vertical surfaces first, and then I come back and we're going to do these horizontal surfaces. And as you can see, I'm just kind of moving the paint around a little bit. And as the brush loads up, of course, you're going to want to clean that brush off. And you can always remove more and more of that pigment if you don't like how it looks. But we're not doing any streaking here because these are flat areas. Or horizontal areas, I should say. not that they're flat. Well, you know what I'm saying. Now, since these are oil pigments, we can just take our time and do all of our blending that we need to. And like I say, if there is too much of a specific color on there and you want to get it off, then you can come back with the enamel thinner and clean those areas up. So unlike the turret right here on the engine deck, I'm going to add a little bit of that titanium white there to kind of give it a more faded, lighter look, kind of a dusty look on top of that yellow ochre that we put on. Now there is no wait time to let anything dry here. I'm just adding paint and different tones here and removing it. And you don't have to use very much, okay? And that's the important thing. If you use too much of your oil paint, you're going to have a mess. You can always add more later. So you need to be reserved in the amount of paint that you're putting on. Now we've also used the oil filter, or the oil dot filter method here on the sides of the hull there, just above our running gear. And don't worry about that shininess of the acrylic stuff. We're going to tone that down right now using our Model Masters Acryl Flat Clear. So we're going to go ahead and shoot everything with this flat clear and seal that in. Now we need some mud effects. So I got my paint palette and brush, the all-important brush. And then, of course, we have our AK products here. And these are an enamel-based products. We got our Earth Effects, which is our lightest color here. And then next, we have our Dark Mud, which is our medium color. And then also we have some Fresh Mud, which is nearly black in color. I don't know if we're going to be using that, but we're going to start off with the medium color right here. Make sure that you shake it up really good. Those little ball bearings that you can get for mixing paint, and drop one of those in there, and that'll help get that mixed up for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of this product and we're just going to put it in our little mixing palette here. We need to get enough of it out. You could use a dropper, or you could try to pour it, but I usually make a mess when I pour it, so I don't do that. So this stuff is kind of concentrated, so we're going to thin it with a little bit of enamel thinner here. I'm just going to use a pipette for that, and we're going to put a few drops in there. That'll help the flow of this product, as well as by cutting it with the thinner, it won't have a very glossy appearance to it. Over time, this will dull down completely when it completely dries. So I'm just going to apply this after it's well mixed, of course, into all the low areas where the mud is going to be thickest. As you can see here, I am coming in over top of the acrylic thick mud that we had put on before to give it body, and now we're just adding the color in, and we'll continue around the hull, just on the low spots, getting that that medium color mud in around our road wheel arms, if I can think of what they're called. And we're just going to keep this kind of low. And we'll also go in around the back of the vehicle as well. Continuing around the vehicle. So as mud is collected, of course, and water drains down, you'll have your darker color towards the bottom of the vehicle. So next up, we're going to do the exact same thing with our earth effects, which is the lightest mud color that we have here. And we're just going to go in right above our darker mud effects. And we're just going to put this lighter color in. And you don't have to wait for the previous color to dry. We're just going to kind of get that mud on our fenders here, and we'll just go around the vehicle. And we'll continue on just around above where the darker color is, all the way around. And just like on our front fenders, we're going to add a little bit of this lighter mud here on our rear fenders as well. And don't be worried about it. We're going to come back and kind of feather those sharp lines in after we get all this on. Now when it comes to our running gear, our road wheels and drive sprockets and idlers, or drive wheels and idlers, I kind of want this mixture a lot thinner so that it will run around all of the details that are on these items. And so I'm about a 50-50 mix here, and that'll give, once the enamel thinner has set off and dried, this will be more of a dusty look. So we're going to go ahead and we'll apply that to the drive wheels and our road wheels. And you don't want to forget to do the inside of the rim area there, because that's where this is going to collect. And we'll go around the tires too, and this is where those details in those rubber tires is going to pick up this pigment, and it'll settle in to all those little holes and the little grooves that are molded in, and that'll give us a nice look. So now we're going to transition back into our tracks. Now this is the appearance of the tracks after they're fully dry, and this is after the warm water rinse. And as you can see, we've got that nice crusty patina look kind of going on there. But there are some things that we need to do to make our tracks look more realistic. And now, since these are metal tracks, we're going to take and use this little sanding stick here. And of course some sandpaper. And we're going to start to remove some of that burnishing. So we're going to zoom in here, and as you can see, this stick is just the right size. It's about, I don't know, maybe 1/4 inch. And we are going to go right down beside the guide horns, which are in the center of the shoes there. And we're going to polish off that burnished look that chemical has put on for us. And this is where those idlers, the road wheels, and the drive wheels as well would be riding on the track supporting the vehicle. And so now we can get that nice polished look going. As you can see here, that works out really well. And then we'll take a little bit of sandpaper here, and our guide horns are going to have some wear on them as well. So we are just going to take and polish off. Now you could use that sanding stick for this too. The paper, sanding paper, it works just as well. And we'll polish up both sides of our guide horns. And also the contact areas on those guide horns where it's going to make contact with the drive wheel, which has those pins that are bolted through them to engage these guide horns. Also, we don't want to forget about the contact area where the tracks meet the ground. There's going to be some polished areas there as well. And so we're just going to use our sandpaper here and remove that burnished look there to make those details kind of stand out for us. Now once we're done sanding all this, we'll give it a warm water rinse again and set them aside to let them dry. But as you can see here, this is kind of the look that we're going for. So now it's time to go ahead and take care of those hard lines we have with our mud effects here. So I'm just using a brush and some enamel thinner, and we're going to come back in and we're going to kind of blot and feather the edges of that hard line that is left where we put our mud on. I kind of want a dirty transition line of departure, I guess, between the paint job and the mud. And we would just remove anything that we don't want on there. If you've got too much here and there, you can take and blend it away, or you can just feather the edges. And I'm just using a blotting motion here to get that done for us. And we'll also blend the two colors together if we have any hard separation line between the two mud colors. We don't want it to be kind of in your face. Now, we're not going to see most of this on the side of the vehicle, up underneath the fenders anyway, but it's always good practice to kind of get those things blended in nicely. Now, with our tracks completely dry from our rinsing, to get rid of all that old dust and stuff, I have these craft sticks here, and we're just going to lay these down on some paper towels. And I'm kind of creating a little groove there where we can have our guide teeth, or guide horns, to slide into. And I don't have to worry about chasing the tracks around the mat. We're going to go back to our earth effects, which is the lightest color that we have. And we have it mixed up 50-50 with our Tester's enamel thinner, since it is an enamel product. And we're going to give our tracks a light mud wash. Yeah, it's going to kind of, cover up a lot of that burnished detail, but really, I mean, that's kind of what weathering is all about. It's about layering, and so we'll just come in and make sure that we get our mud down into that little waffle grid pattern there on the shoes. And this is a thin mixture. It's a 50-50 mix, so a lot of this is going to evaporate off, and it's going to leave us a nice coat. And you don't worry about it being really uniform. It's not that important. The important thing is that we have the idea that we have mud on the tracks. And once we've got that side done, we're just going to flip it over and just line our sticks back up here, because that little coat of that dusting coat of mud is going to be on the side facing the road wheels as well. So we're just going to take and just lightly brush our mixture right on over top. And don't worry about where you get it, just kind of get it on there. It's the whole mud is messy, okay, and it doesn't really care where it goes on the real vehicle. So we're just targeting these areas on the track, and anything that is on there that we don't like, we can come back and clean that up later. So now that I've given this plenty of time to dry, I'm coming in with a cotton swab and a little bit of that enamel thinner, and we're just going to rub it right down on those polished areas that we had spent all that time sanding, because we do want that to show through on the vehicle when it's complete. So we're just going to clean that up right there. Just make sure that you don't have too much enamel thinner on your Q-tip when you go to do this. And we're going to do the same thing on the side where that waffle pattern is, and kind of clean off all those areas where we had sanded it previously before we put our enamel mud effects on. As you can see, it comes off really easy. And we'll just set these aside and let them dry completely. So now we need to add some rust effects, and this is the Vallejo pigment pack for rust. You got your rust and your old rust and your new rust, and we also have the last one there, the brown iron oxide. So I'm just going to pick one out of all of these, and we're going to be using this one right here, the old rust. I think that's the color that I would like to use on our exhaust. And of course, we also have this color here, natural iron oxide, which is the color we're going to use for our soot. So I have all these colors in this little painter's palette here, and I'm just going to pick out the one that we're going to use. It's the old rust, I think. So I'm using water as a carrier for it, and this helps me target the area where I want this rust to go. And that's going to be right here on our exhaust tips. And this is going to add a little bit of color deviation from the acrylic rust color that we painted these pipes in the paint video, which was our base color for the rust. And this pigment will add a little bit of visual texture, and as it dries it will develop its color. So after we get this on, we're going to go ahead and move up to our shovel head, which is a metal part as well that has some surface area that has those wear marks on it. And we're just going to lightly go over top of that, and that will provide the surface rust. And you don't want to go real thick because we want to be able to see those wear marks that we dry brushed on with the enamel colors in the paint video. So we kind of want it to be visible after it's dry. So now we're going to switch over to our black color after cleaning our brush off. And that's that oxide, rust oxide. It's a really black color. It's good for soot and any other dark pigment area that you may need that's nearly black. And we're just going to put that up inside the pipes a little bit. And we'll also use it to go right around the edge of the rims of our exhaust exits there, just to show some soot buildup. Now once these pigments dry completely, the colors will develop fully, and if you decide you need it a little bit darker, you can always come back and add more later. And that's the effect that we get using our dry pigments that we used water to actually apply them. The water allows us to keep control of these things without having this dry pigment go all over the model. Now with everything dry, we're going to go ahead and use this enamel thinner kind of as a fixer for our dry pigments. And I'm just taking a clean brush here, and we're just going to go and just barely touch our shovel spade there. And this enamel thinner will just really wick right through all that dry pigment and kind of fix it and make it a little bit tougher to knock off there. So that's all there is to it. So now we can start some final assembly here. We're going to go ahead and put on all of our running gear, those drive wheels, and also our idlers and our road wheels as well. We'll get all those put on to the kit, or I should say lower hull. Now we can go ahead and put our track on, and we just need to feed it in over top of between our running gear and our fenders there. And of course I am going to just use my tweezers and kind of help guide it in, and we'll just feed it up over top of everything and get it into place. So for being able to align our shoes up correctly there, we're just going to flip the model over so that the track is down against the mat, and then that will help us align everything, and we'll just push our tracks up against the road wheels there, and we'll be able to more easily, I should say, get those links lined up. So we need to put our pin in, so this is where it gets a little tricky. Not that it's hard to do, it's just it's a really small hole and a really small pin. So we're just going to get that pin lined up. And then we can just take and push that pin all the way home. Of course, with that burnishing fluid, there is just a little bit of dust inside those holes, which will help hold the pin in, so no glue needed. Alright, now we can go ahead and attach these external fuel tanks that we have. Now this T34-85 has 3 of these external tanks, and I'm going to use that medium strength CA glue to attach these to the upper hull and just press them firmly into place. And with our tracks installed, we can go ahead and put our tow cables on. And since this is wire, we just need to kind of lay it on the vehicle itself and get it positioned, and we will take and make whatever adjustments is necessary in order to get it to lay exactly where we want it. And if you've seen the build video, you know that we replaced that plastic polystyrene part, the cable section, with copper wire. So we're able to actually maneuver this and bend it and get that look that we want. And there we go. It looks pretty good. So there's supposed to be a spare track section on the front slope of our T34. And it's bolted on. So I'm just going to use some of those leftover metal tracks. And we're going to use some bolt heads here that I've had for a while. I'm just going to size up, because these were bolted on to the front through those little bitty holes that are in the ends of the tracks. So it looks like we're going to use the ones on the end there. It's what, 1 millimeter? But I think they're actually smaller than 1 millimeter. But what we need to do first is paint these little bolt heads with that 4BO, that Russian green. And I think it's easier to do now than it would be to do after we've got them glued in place. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and just paint the heads of 4, 5, or 6 of these. Probably need a couple of extra. Just to make it easier, so once we assemble it, we don't have to worry about trying to paint these little things on our track. So next we need to glue these on. So I've already put the bolt heads on that we painted. They're really small and you wouldn't be able to see what I was doing anyway. I could barely see what I was doing. But I use CA glue to attach them because they are a resin part. And here I kind of make a little bit of a mistake. I'm applying the glue to the back side of this track, which is still really flexible because it is a workable track, which kind of causes a small issue, which is the track's not laying flat like it's supposed to. So I do have to break these loose, and I reset them nice and flat, and then we can go ahead and attach it to the front slope of the armor plate there on the front of the vehicle with the CA glue. Now with our track attached finally, these nice shiny spots on our spare track, which we had polished off earlier, it's a little bit too bright. So this is like a used section of track that the crew has replaced. Maybe some track links or something on the vehicle, but we do need to add a little rust to those shiny spots. And I think that'll add a little bit of extra detail, something visually more interesting on our vehicle. So we're just going to do the same thing we did with our shovel. Just add this on over top using water as a carrier, and this is the same old rust pigment that we used on our shovel and our exhaust as well. And we'll just go ahead and add that on. Now with that done, we can go ahead and add our turret. And I think we're looking pretty good, except it's not quite finished, I don't think. So we just need something else to balance out the tank. So let's go ahead and go to our spares box. I know you guys got spares boxes, right? So we're kind of looking for, there we go. I see what we need. So I had painted these up a long time ago. I think before I even started the channel. And these are logs. So we actually need some logs. And a lot of times on T34 tanks, they had these logs on the side, usually just laid up on the fender. So we're just going to pick out a couple of these. And what they use these for is to anti-tank ditching. If your tank gets stuck in a ditch, you can use these logs here to help extract the tank. Sort of a self-recovery method there to get out of the tank ditch. So we're just going to lay these up on the fender here, because that's usually how the Russians did it. Get them adjusted where we want them. And I think that's probably going to look pretty good. Let's take a look and see what we got. So I think that's going to wrap up this build series. It's an enjoyable model to build. And of course we added some extras. We added the metal tracks by Sanzing. And I really like those tracks. They really work out quite well. Quite a joy to do. And also we did some PE on this kit, as well as creating our own grab handles. And the real time saver there is in the T34 85. All the grab handles are the same length. So when we made our jig for that, we only had to make one jig to do all those handles. And we also did some texturing on this kit. And also we can't forget about our weathering techniques that we used on this particular one, especially the oil paint dot filter method, which really adds some extra color to it, and I think it helps that weathering effect, and it looks, I think it looks pretty good. You guys let me know down in the comments what you think about that. And you probably noticed that on the rear deck there that I did kind of cave in the that Photo-Etch metal screen on the back of our tank there. If you look at any reference photos at all, you'll see that there's probably maybe one photo out of all the ones that you can find where it's not caved in. Apparently it's not really structurally sound, and with troops walking on top of it and equipment being drug over and what have you, that was pretty much the case, that they're always kind of bent down. So we've done that on this kit as well, trying to get that a little extra realism in there. So that wraps up part 6 and this kit build. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and leave me a comment down in the comments if you did. I'd appreciate that. And if you liked it, let me know. And if you didn't, you can let me know that too. Special thanks to all my subscribers. It's because of you guys that I keep making these videos for you to enjoy, and I hope you enjoyed this one. And if you're new to the channel and you enjoyed this build and you're not a subscriber, if I've earned it, go ahead and subscribe. There will be more builds to come. So until next time, guys, take care.